This is Orsi, the Old Guy at oldguytalkstome.com, a podcast dedicated to helping older guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. Join me regularly as I share my interviews with experts on various topics that include anti-aging, sex, relationships, and other things that will help you create that life that you want. Now, I want you to do three things. First of all, I want you to subscribe so you don't miss any of this life-changing information. 2, share it with others. And 3, review. Be sure to do all 3. And now for our podcast. This is Orsi, Old Guy from www.oldguytalkstome.com, a podcast dedicated to helping older guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. And a big part of, well, creating a kick-ass life has to do when you are snoozing. And how well you are snoozing or not snoozing. And I know it's an issue for a lot of people, especially as they get older. We're going to talk about that later on. But I have in the house with me today Dr. Kirk Parsley, who's discovered that the most underused tool in the world for enhancing performance is quality sleep. And this led him to inventing the all-natural supplement, Sleep Remedy, which will have a link to that product in the program notes, so you don't have to worry about trying to find it. Dr. Parsley served as an Undersea Medical Officer at the Navy Special Warfare Group 1 from June 2009 to January 2013. While there, he led the development and supervised the group's first sports medicine rehabilitation center. He is a former SEAL and received his medical degree from Bethesda Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences in 2004. Dr. Parsley has been a member of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine since 2006 and has served as a Naval Specialist Warfare expert on sleep medicine. He is certified in hormonal modulation, which old guy is a great believer in better living through science. I can attest to that. I've been doing stuff for 23, 24 years that used to be, now everybody's doing. After leaving the Navy, he went into concierge medicine and consulting. He continues to consult for multiple corporations and professional athletes. He lectures worldwide on sleep wellness and hormonal optimization. His philosophy of wellness is simple. In order to optimize our health and get the most out of our bodies and minds, we must live more closely to the way we evolved as a species. That's true in a lot of different things, not just sleep, but also a little bit about how we eat to a certain extent. He believes that many diseases and disorders that we accept as inevitable in modern society are unnecessary complications of poor sleeping, living in a toxic environment, and eating foods we were not designed to digest. If it says good till 2025, it's more like embalming fluid than it is food. I love the expiration on the canned foods in the supermarket. Good till 2025. His passion is to help his patients and clients achieve the highest quality of life possible and realize their health, performance, and longevity goals. Welcome to oldguytalkstome.com.
Thank you. I feel quite welcomed. I didn't know this radio voice guy was going to come out.
Yes, I do have 2 personas. I have the indoor quiet voice, and then I do have the radio voice that comes out.
Right.
And it actually, and also it comes out after the second drink too.
My Texas twang comes out after the second drink.
So it does. Yeah, people are like, oh, yes, you're not the first guest to have been surprised when I start my intro. Like, oh, wait a second, who is that guy? So let's get at it. Let's get at it. First question: why is sleep important? What are the consequences of being sleep deprived in terms of finances, health, and happiness? And because I watched some of your presentations, and you talk about how it really affects your whole life.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the overarching theme of that intro that you read was it's really like 99% of all health is about lifestyle choices. Now, unfortunately, we made some choices when we were ignorant or foolish or drunk or both or all three. And, and there's some sequelae to that. And then we try to do what we can with modern gadgets to try to improve that, to try to mitigate the damaging effects of any bad choices we've made in the past. But to be honest, we're going to make some bad choices in the future as well. So it's really all a balancing act. I tell people that it's, that there's an ideal way of living, right? Like we could sit down and we could design it out, and there would be some arguments, of course, especially in the nutritional field. Everybody, there's good science from everything from ketogenesis to veganism, and there's junk science on everything in between there as well. So, but we could pretty well agree, that this is a very old body that we're living in. It's been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and it took millions of years to get here, right? And it's been evolving as the planet evolves. As things change on the planet, this body changes, and it wasn't that long ago. I mean, it wasn't long ago at all. If you think about 200 years ago, how many people, stayed up really late watching television? Zero. I mean, it wasn't an option, right? They didn't have rural electrification. 200 years ago, there wasn't even light bulbs, I don't think. I don't remember exactly when the light bulb came out, but a couple of hundred years ago, nobody had electricity. Nobody stayed up late. Nobody had televisions. Nobody drove everywhere. Like, people were more active. They walked more. There wasn't a such thing as Twinkies. There wasn't a such thing as Doritos. Like, everybody lived off of what this planet produced for them to live off of, and they worked in synergy with the planet. Now we believe that we're so damn smart that we can just throw away hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years of evolution. We got it figured out from here. We're just going to make it dark when it's cold, or dark when it's light, and light when it's dark, and cold when it's warm, and warm when it's cold. We're going to figure out a way to get calories in that has nothing to do with any type of animal or plant life out there. And that arrogance has really led to a lot of the health problems. A lot of the Neolithic health disease are simply bad choices. And so there's an ideal way to live. And we could sit there and say, you use the sun as your exclusive cue as to when to go to sleep and when to get up. And you take long sustained activities throughout the day because you have to walk everywhere you go, and you got to dig up your own food and hunt your own animals and climb trees and whatever you have to do. And everybody's just going to stay active all day. Everybody's going to go forage for what they need. Everybody's going to build their own stuff. You're not driving a car anywhere. You aren't, and that would be the way we evolved, and we would expect the best health from this machine as possible, because now we have the advent of antibiotics and vaccines and medical care that we could benefit from that and not do all of the bad stuff. But that's not realistic. So there's ideal, and then there's reality. And then between there, that's where we mitigate. Like, that's where we supplement. That's where we use, devices, gadgets, practices like meditative practices, or, practices around sleep ritualization to improve our sleep, or practices around mindfulness to improve our stress levels or our food choices or whatever. So sleep is the foundation of all that. When I first started lecturing, in pretty much within the SEAL teams. It was these big collective events where we got a lot of SEALs together before they deployed and when they came back from deployment. And we worked on a lot of things that they and their families were going to go through while they were deployed and when they got back. And so one of the things I would lecture on is the overall health. And I would say that there are 4 pillars of health. There's sleep, nutrition, exercise, and stress mitigation. So you could call that mindfulness if you wanted to, or that can be community. That can be a lot of things, but there's a way to kind of decrease your stress and increase your sense of community and connection. And that's that pillar. I've since changed that in the last 3 to 4 years, where I say sleep is actually the foundation in which those other 3 pillars are sitting upon. When I first started down the sleep track, I had no interest in sleep. I mean, I had no special education in sleep. I simply was in a situation where I was a doctor for the SEAL teams. SEALs usually lie to their doctors because the doctor's the guy who can put you on the bench. They don't want to be on the bench. So They just come in and they tell you everything's fine when they do their checkups, and then they go on about their way. But they would come to my office, they'd tell me the truth because they trusted me not to put them on the bench because I was a SEAL and I had a good reputation as a SEAL. And so they trusted me. And they came in my office and they started talking to me about things that you're familiar with. They started talking about how they walked in the room. They couldn't figure out why they walked in the room. They'd turn around, they'd walk out of the room. They'd remember why they went in the room. They'd go back in the room. They couldn't remember why they walked in the room again. They left their house 4 or 5 times. They'd get in their car, go to back out, realize they forgot their wallet, go back in and get their wallet. And, it takes them 4 to 5 times to leave, go. Not sleeping well, waking up really early, saying, well, can't go back to sleep. I'm just going to go work out. I'm going to work hard all day. I'm going to come home, go to sleep. I'll get a good night's sleep tonight. Never happens. They just keep chasing the same thing. Their concentration was down. Their mood was all over the place. They get angry real easy. They get sad real easy. They get scared real easy. Their motivation by SEAL standards, by their own standards, was low. Obviously, by most people's standards, the motivation would still be high, but for their standards, it was a low motivation. They were still doing everything they needed to do. They just didn't feel like it. Having a lot of, having a lot of time just directing their attention. Some were having, sexual performance issues, sexual desire issues, and none of it amounted to disease. And I was a Western trained medical physician. I'd been to a regular Western medical school, and I knew how to recognize, diagnose, and treat disease. That's what I knew. They didn't have any disease. So they told me all of the stuff. I did their labs, their hormones, their inflammatory markers, their insulin sensitivity, all of this stuff. They looked like 50-year-old, 55-year-old obese men. I mean, on their labs. And the guy in front of me was, in his maybe 30s and pretty jacked and athletic looking. So it didn't really match. And I honestly didn't have any idea, but this was 2009. So they'd been at war for 8 years. So I thought, well, maybe this has something to do with, battle fatigue or shell shock or the other stuff they've talked about in other wars. Maybe it's adrenal issues. And it took me a while. It took me, probably 100 patients coming in and telling me the same thing before it dawned on me that every guy who had come in my office had said something about sleep difficulties, and most of them had said something about using sleep drugs. And so I started doing research on what happens when you sleep, because I didn't know. They didn't teach me that in medical school. I'd never had a single class on sleep. I knew what the sleep drugs were. I knew how they acted, but I didn't know what the side effects of them were necessarily, and what the prevalence of side effects were. So I started looking into it. I really just wanted to correct their hormone imbalances. I wanted to improve their inflammation and their oxidation and raise their testosterone and decrease their estradiol and increase their growth hormone and their thyroid, their free thyroid and adrenal hormones. That's what I wanted to do, but I couldn't do that because that's disqualifying. You can't have SEALs on medications that they require to be able to function. I had the good fortune of being, however, I had the good fortune of the SEALs having a good reputation at that time. Not to say they don't now, but when I was a SEAL, nobody knew what the hell a SEAL was. When these guys were, this time they already had this sort of celebrity status in the SEAL teams. And so I could watch a TED talk or read a book or listen to a podcast, and I could call up whoever was on that and say, hey, I'm the doctor for the West Coast SEAL teams. I read your book. I listened to your TED talk. I saw your lecture, whatever. Would I be able to come train with you? Could I consult with you? Could I run patients past you? Like I'm having some complex patients I haven't figured out. And they were all really gracious, and every single one of them said yes. So I got to learn a lot really quickly. And as a way of encouraging them, SEALs are really interested in performance. And so I would lecture at these events. I would lecture about performance. I would lecture about how missing 2 hours of sleep decreases your total testosterone by 30%. Decreases your insulin sensitivity in some tissues by 30%, decreases your thyroid function, increases your adrenal hormones. Your adrenal hormones are catabolic, meaning they're breaking you down. Anabolic hormones are things like growth hormone and thyroid and testosterone. Those are anabolic. The catabolic hormones break you down. The anabolic hormones build you up. So I would talk to them about how when you don't sleep well, you take those out of a balance. And they knew what testosterone was. They knew what growth hormone was. So they knew these terms, and they were then motivated to listen to me about sleep. And then once they started getting some benefits from it, then the leadership jumped on board, and we started working on adjusting their training schedules so that they could get better sleep, and adjusting the living environments, the sleeping environments where they lived when they were at training sites. And that's really how I got into sleep. And I was probably, to be quite honest, I was probably only like halfway convinced that sleep was the big problem. I thought there was probably something else that I wasn't quite getting to. But now here we are coming up on 12 years later. The more I learn about sleep, the more I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid and just saying, this really is, Occam's razor. This solves the most problems with the fewest amount of assumptions. And I've just seen absolutely phenomenal results with getting people to improve their lifestyle choices. Now, to be fair, you can't expect optimal performance with mediocre adherence to the instruments that you're using to improve your lifestyle. So getting great sleep and eating like crap and not exercising and not controlling your stress is not nearly as good as, doing all of those things at the same time. But if you're going to focus on one, if for some reason you had the false choice of just being able to work on one, sleep would be the one.
Yeah. So for our audience, what are the stages of sleep, and why is it critical to be in some of them on a regular basis?
Well, so the important thing to remember about all medical science is that all biological science is that it's all observational, right? So that means that we see stuff, and we see stuff that's happening in a certain way in a certain environment, and we deem that to be better than the outcome if other things happen. So we say, well, this is now the ideal, and so this is what we're going to focus towards. So what all the sleep stages are is our description. The best summary that we can come up with as sleep scientists is to say, well, if we measure your brain waves, so we put a bunch of electrodes all over your head, we measure your brain waves, and this isn't exact. Like, people think that there's some great information.
I got Kirk. I gotta go. I've had a sleep study. There is no fucking way you get a good night's sleep at a sleep study center. It is like, between all the electrodes that you got all over your head and everywhere else, and the guy coming in checking you every once in a while.
It is comical. I've had a sleep study. I really had a sleep study just so that I knew what I was getting my patients into. I've done that with a lot of stuff. Like before I cast people down a certain road, I usually go and experience that myself to see if it's just ridiculous. And it is, obviously, right? So you put 36 electrodes all over people's heads as if that's not invasive enough. Of course, all those have electrodes coming off or have wires coming off. And then we're harnessing all those wires and putting those in cables and strapping that to your body. A lot of times you're in like a hospital gown just to make it that much more ridiculous. You put a strap around so that we can tell when your chest is moving up and down and when you're breathing. Put a pulse ox on your finger. You have all these wires and tubes all over you. Now lay down on this rubber mattress in this sterile room with a camera pointed at you, and then some guys right on the other side of the wall talking and using their computer and coming in, as you say, to check on you throughout the night. I mean, it's an absurd technique, but it's the best we've got. And when we do all of those things, we can combine into these, this algorithm essentially, right? So we're just thinking we're dumping all of this data into a computer, and we're looking at your brainwaves. And again, that's not a super specific thing. It's not like we're saying, oh, look, his amygdala is really lighting up during this period of this stage of sleep. No. It's nothing like that. It's akin to I think it was Matt Walker, somebody in a book somewhere had a really good metaphor. It's akin to dropping a microphone down inside of a stadium. And if the people in the stadium are doing the wave, you could pick that up on the microphone, right? That's what we're studying. If everybody's just talking, we don't have any idea what anybody's saying, where anybody is, nothing's like that. So it's a very, very rudimentary overall, what do your brainwave patterns look like? It's very gross. And then we combine that with how fast you're breathing and how much you're moving, whether or not your eyes are moving around, and what your pulse ox is, right? What your blood pressure is, or not blood pressure, but your heart rate. And we combine all of those, and we can and then when we put them in a computer, it brings out this nice little graph that we taught it to draw. And basically goes, stage 1 is pre-sleep. So stage 1 is when you get into your bed and your intention is to go to sleep, and you can still sense things, right? All of your sensory still works while you're asleep, which is why you can wake people up. Your eyes still work while you're asleep. Your ears are still working. Your nose is still working. You can still taste. You can still hear, smell, touch, everything. You can still sense touch, heat, sharp, cold, all of that, right? You just aren't paying attention to it. So when you first become aware that you're not paying attention to your environment as well as you usually do, or it's just a different sense. Like you can hear people talking, you can hear a television, you can hear your neighbor, but you're not processing it the way you usually do. That's stage 1. That's not truly sleep, but that's when we start tracking it. And then you go down to stage 2, which is true sensory loss. Like you've really quit paying attention to your environment at this point. But stage 2 is primarily transitional. It has some bursts that flips you into other stages. And then you go down into stages 3 and 4, which is now oftentimes summarized as either slow wave sleep or non-REM sleep. And then we plot this to where on the x-axis is time and on the y-axis is the stage. And the higher the number, the lower the stage. So you get down to stage 4, you're running along the x-axis for a certain amount of time, and then you stair step out of it, and you go back from 4 to 3 to 2, and instead of going back to 1, you go into a REM cycle, and then you come out of that REM cycle and you come back into stage 2, and that is now one sleep cycle, and that sleep cycle lasts anywhere from 90 to 120 minutes, depending on all sorts of variables, and it won't be the same for you every cycle of each night, or each night won't be exactly the same of the night before. There is some variability to it, but we have this sort of idealized version. And what's happening in stages in the slow wave sleep or the deep sleep, the non-REM sleep, stages 3 and 4, it's all the same thing. What's happening in that phase of sleep is the most anabolic behavior that's going to happen to your body over any 24-hour period. So if you think about it, you were born into this contract that you had no say over. You didn't even have to sign it, but when you're born into this contract, and that contract said a couple of things. You are going to be held to the physical and biological concepts that govern this planet that you're on. You are going to die, and it takes about 8 hours to recover from being awake for 16 hours. The entire purpose of going to sleep every night is to repair you from today and to prepare you for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So that's a contract you don't have any say over. You can choose not to sleep as much, but you're breaking the contract, and there's consequences for breaking the contract. So when you go into the different stages of sleep the way you should, and you have a sleep cycle that lasts 120 minutes, your first sleep cycle is 80 to 90% deep sleep. That's the most anabolic time. That's when your growth hormone is being secreted, your testosterone is being secreted, your inflammation is, your immune system is working at the highest it's ever going to work, and all of your anabolic behavior. So every cell in your body is simply a smaller version of you. It takes in nutrients. It does work with those nutrients. It produces waste. Okay. You, just like your body, you take in food, you produce movement, work, activity, and you have waste products. You have to get rid of the waste products. That's primarily happening, especially in your brain. That's primarily happening during your first and second deep sleep cycles. Let me back up and say one thing that I think brings clarity to all of this. you've heard of fight or flight, right?
Right.
Okay. So fight or flight is simply the most amount of stress hormones that your body can pump out. And it's only triggered when that's the appropriate thing, or it should only be triggered when that's the appropriate thing. And the only reason for that to occur is if you or somebody that you're protective of is in serious harm of bodily damage or death. That's really the only time fight or flight should come in. Now, what happens when you go into fight or flight? You essentially become superhuman. Like, you become the best version of you could possibly be to get out of that situation. Or maybe not superhuman, but you become super self, right? So the first thing that happens, all these stress hormones spike. And when they spike, they have all sorts of changes to you. It increases your heart rate. It increases your blood pressure. It's pushing more blood out. And just pushing it out faster. Your lungs dilate. You're actually able to use more of your lungs. Your pupils dilate. You take in more light, a broader field of vision. Your pain threshold goes up. Your reflexes get faster. Your muscles get stronger. The cortisol, that stress hormone that's being secreted, that's causing you to mobilize all the stored glucose you have, stored in the form of glycogen. That's releasing all of that so that all of your cells have more fuel. And the whole purpose of that, and then the other thing that happens is it shuts down your prefrontal cortex, which we call your executive functioning. And the reason for that is because you want to be primal and you want to be impulsive during fight or flight. You don't want to think about how you're going to steer your way out of a car crash. You don't want to think about how you're going to get away from the tiger. You don't want to think about how you're going to get away from the guy shooting at you. You just want to get away. And your impulses are primal. They're going to get you out of there better than anything you can think of. So, if you think about that, it's like, okay, well, if I can be super me like that, if I can be faster and stronger and have higher endurance and higher pain threshold and better vision and use more of my lungs and all that, like, why don't I do that all the time? Because I'm consuming a bunch of resources that my body is planning on using for other things. And a lot of things that my body usually does, it isn't doing anymore. What is the purpose of my immune system fighting off an infection if the tiger gets me? That's a slow process. My immune system doesn't really matter. What's the concept? Like, what would be the benefit? What would be the evolutionary benefit for me to digest the food in my stomach if I'm being chased by a tiger or a lion? None, right? Makes no sense. So essentially what's happening when you're in fight or flight is you're using your body and your body's resources as a fuel source to fuel your body to get out of this terrible situation. Now, the reason I bring that up is because that is maximum catabolic activity. That means you are using yourself, you're eating yourself to get out of that situation, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. You are consuming yourself. You're consuming all your resources to get out of that situation. The exact opposite of fight or flight is deep sleep. When you're in deep sleep, none of that other stuff is true, right? Your heart rate's low, your blood pressure's low, your respiratory rate is low. You aren't even using your eyes. And you are the most anabolic that you will ever be. Your anabolic hormones are up. Your sexual reproduction processes are going up. Your immune system is going up. You're repairing damaged tissues, damaged muscles. As most people know, you don't actually get stronger while you work out. While you exercise, you're actually damaging tissue.
Right, exactly.
You get stronger when that tissue has the time and resources to repair. And when it has the time and resources to repair, it uses the damage that happened to it as the template for what it needs to be better at. And it comes back better able to do that work. So if you're lifting a lot of weight and you're tearing the muscle fibers themselves, well, then that muscle fiber is going to grow back stronger to where it's less likely to get torn next time you do that same amount of work. And now you're stronger. And then same adaptations happen if you're talking about endurance or whatever you're doing. And your brain does this to some degree as well, preferentially fortifying certain pathways and certain neurological activities if that's what you're doing a lot of. So essentially, everything you're getting better at during sleep. Mm-hmm. During the day, you're actually breaking it down. You're causing stresses on your body and your brain in order to get better. And now you have to go to sleep and get the benefit of the sleep in order to actually get better from all of that. So the stages of sleep, primarily anabolic, and think about the body and restoration and repair is the deep sleep. And then the REM sleep is a lot of neurocognitive stuff. So you're emotionally categorizing events. When something emotional happens during the day and you don't really think about it, you don't really process it enough during the day. When you go to sleep, you rehearse that, you think about it, you figure out if it's a big deal or not, and you put it where it belongs in your category, your index of what's stressful and what bothers you. Also, anything that you've learned, that gets shifted from your working memory to your long-term memory. That happens during REM sleep. If you learn something during the day, you're holding on to that information in your working memory. Once you go to sleep, you consolidate that and you put it away in a situation. You put it away in a pattern to where not only do you remember what you've learned, but you can compare and contrast that to other things that you already knew. And now you've actually learned that material. You've integrated that into your body of knowledge, your knowing. And now you've actually gotten better at something cognitive. You remember something better. You're more skilled. This is the same thing that happens with muscle memory. The reason you're paralyzed during REM sleep, you're actually rehearsing. So if you've been practicing with your bow, or you've been learning a guitar, or you've been trying to get faster at typing or driving or whatever it is, but you have some sort of muscle memory skill, that's actually being consolidated while you're asleep during REM sleep. If you miss out on REM sleep, you miss out on the benefit of that learning that you did during that day. That practice that you've been doing isn't nearly as powerful. So essentially, what I'm saying is the worst sales pitch ever invented is that sleep is the most important thing for everything that you care about.
This is Orsi official Old Guy at oldguytalkstome.com, a podcast dedicated to helping older guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. And part of creating that life has to do with sex. But often for old guys, there's a problem. It's called erectile dysfunction. And guys don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it to their significant others. They don't want to talk about it to their doctors. And they don't talk about it to other guys. I mean, let's face it, guys just don't sit around and talk about it. And the problem is that it affects their emotional and physical intimacy. It causes pain in their life. Often, men are embarrassed. They're embarrassed about it and will tend to even avoid sex for fear of not being able to perform. Now, for a while, those pills will work, and then eventually those are going to stop working. And then you start looking at other options, other medical therapies. And if you happen to do that, you find out that, well, they're very expensive. They can cost thousands of dollars. That's right, thousands of dollars. And some of them require, well, for you to go to the doctor multiple times, maybe 6 to 12 times. Now, for many men, the cost and the time is prohibitive, and they just end up not doing anything. One of the most famous therapies that you hear about on the internet and radio right now is called sonic wave therapy. And for many men, it works. But again, cost prohibitive, thousands of dollars, multiple visits. But now I'm pleased to tell you that there is a sonic wave ED therapy that's available for you to use in the privacy of your home. That's right. You don't have to go see a doctor. You don't have to get a prescription. No one has to know. You don't have to be embarrassed by going to the doctor's office with it. And best of all, it's at a fraction of the cost. Now, you may think that this is some sort of like cheesy little device that, well, it can't be as good as the thing that they use in the doctor's office. Well, I want to tell you, first of all, that this is an FDA-registered device. That's right, FDA-registered device. And it puts out the same sonic wave signature as the in-office device that doctors use. Now, it's an amazing thing. And you can do this in the privacy of your home. Again, you don't have to be frustrated. You don't have to continue to suffer. And your partner does not need to suffer also, because they do. They're hurt as much as you are. Now you're asking me, how do I find out more about this? How do I get this device? Well, let me tell you. Go to getmyphoenix.com/old guy. Again, getmyphoenix.com/old guy, old guy one word, and click on that link, and you start to get the information and start to get the treatment that you're looking for and regain that confidence, your ability as a man, and regain the ability to have both physical and emotional intimacy. You're going to be glad you did. You're going to be glad you did. Don't wait. Don't procrastinate. Don't hesitate. Do it now. Get it. Stop the suffering. Stop the pain. Recreate that life that you want. Remember, at oldguytalkstome.com, it's all about creating a kick-ass life for yourself and those that you love. Yeah, it sounds interesting. I just, when we talked about sleeping, deep sleep, I just have to. I have some crazy dreams, and I'm actually tired when I wake up. The one that comes to mind, I told my wife, because a lot of times, sometimes I remember, sometimes I don't. But one was I was rollerblading on off ramps in Paris, saving the world from nuclear disaster.
Must have been some fast rollerblades.
Yeah, it was bizarre. It was bizarre. And no, I was not taking any hallucinogens.
Well, all hallucinogenics do is get you in the same brain state that you're in when you're dreaming. Okay. And it just makes you aware. It gives you consciousness during dreaming. That's what hallucinations are.
Yeah. So as we get older, how do our sleep patterns change?
Well, if you're talking about older from childhood, obviously in childhood you need more sleep. You're growing, right? Yeah. And we can see evidence of the benefit of kids sleeping, right? Because we can see a tired, grouchy kid go to sleep, wake up energized, happy, springy, and maybe a little taller.
How old are you?
50.
Okay. So let's talk about old people.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Don't worry.
Because I'm 68.
We're getting there. Just
I don't even remember 50.
Yeah. Give me a second. I'm going there. So when you're a kid, we see the benefit of sleeping kids. And then, like many things, once we become adults, we think, well, that doesn't apply to me anymore. But it does, right? That was the whole point of it. So when we think about age, the first thing to point out is that there is a chronological age and there's a physiological age, right? Mm-hmm. And again, it's observational. We can't say these things mean you're this old. We can say that, hey, most people who have these things are about this age. That's what I mean by physiological age. If we measure a bunch of stuff in your body, we can say, well, your physiological age is X, meaning that you've aged the same, or you've aged faster, or you've aged slower than average chronologically. Now, once you get to be about 25 years old as a male, men's brains develop a little more slowly than women's, the prefrontal cortex, the executive functioning, which is why you can get 18-year-olds like me to jump out of airplanes and go to war and all sorts of silly stuff like that, because you don't have that good simulator going. Your executive functioning is like a flight simulator for a pilot. You get to make all sorts of mistakes in your head without actually making those mistakes in life, and you don't have to crash the plane 500 times to learn how to fly. Same thing with our adult brains. And so women's brains are completely formed a little earlier than men's, anywhere from the research you read, 2 to 5 years earlier, let's say. But at some point you become an adult, and it's really sort of the full development of the adult brain, which we can say, okay, now you're an adult, and this is what we're going to call your baseline of needing about 8 hours per night. Now, contrary to popular belief, you need that same 8 hours of sleep for the rest of your life. Okay. As I was saying earlier, all the repair from today is happening tonight, getting me ready for tomorrow. If I don't fully repair today, then tomorrow I wake up not fully prepared, which means that I'm not as good as I was yesterday. Mm-hmm. And that is really what we call aging, because I'm a little incomplete today. And if I don't repair that, if I don't catch up on that, then I've essentially lost a step. So as I was saying, when you're kids, when we watch kids, we can watch kids actually get better we can watch them get better almost every day, but we can definitely watch them get better by the months. Like they're going to sleep, they're sleeping, they're waking up better. They're getting taller, they're getting faster, they're getting stronger, they're getting smarter. That's the same attempt we would like to do. Like that's the same thing we'd like to do for the rest of our lives. But at some point that just doesn't work anymore. And we can't repair as fast as we're breaking down. And that's aging. So the more sleep you lose, the faster you age. So your physiological age would be maybe older than your chronological age. So the ideal thing is to focus on, this is why I say sleep is so important, because I just told you there's nothing that you're doing today with intentions of being better tomorrow. There's nothing you're going to do today, practice today, work towards today, that you want to be better at tomorrow, or at least as good tomorrow. There's nothing in there that's not going to be repaired tonight. And that's going to be set tonight. Now, if I don't sleep enough, I wake up tomorrow worse. If I sleep long enough, but I have poor quality of sleep, if I'm using sleep drugs that aren't allowing me to have that nice sleep architecture, we talked about those stair steps up and down, those distinct sleep stages. If that goes away, the benefit of sleep goes away with it. And so if I sleep 6 hours instead of 8 hours, I just shorted the contract 25%. So how am I going to get through? Like if the point of sleeping tonight is to be ready for tomorrow, if I don't sleep tonight, tomorrow still comes. I don't get to put it off. So how am I going to get through tomorrow? I'm going to get through tomorrow by the stress hormones, the same stress hormones that are keeping me away from other dangers. They're keeping me away from the tigers and the car crash and the guy with the guns. Those are the same hormones that I'm going to put into my body to compensate for the fact that I didn't repair last night. Yeah. And I'm going to become catabolic. I'm going to break myself down. I'm going to become weaker and slower. My brain isn't going to work as well. Nothing in my body is none of my systems are going to work as well. I'm not going to be as strong. I'm not going to be as fast. I'm not going to have the same mental cognitive capabilities. I'm not going to have the same mood stability. Nothing about me is going to be the same as if I would have slept a full night. So to answer your question, the sleep patterns change through behavioral and lifestyle changes and life phase changes. When you're 35 or 40 years old and you have a bunch of little kids running around and you sleep like crap, that's the way America's designed. That's the way our society is designed. You don't really have a choice over that. That's not a biological thing. That's a social thing. Work, your shift in sleep around work, that is a social thing. That is not a biological thing. I had a patient who was in her early 80s, I think 83, 84. And when I met her, she had not slept past 4 o'clock in the morning for 20 or 30 years. Wow. She tried to sleep 8 hours a night. She usually got 4 to 5 hours a night. And she had tried every sleep drug. She tried all the gadgets. She did all this stuff. And I worked with her for maybe 6 months and she was sleeping 8 hours per night. And of course she felt remarkably better. And every month that went by, she felt better. She was actually getting physiologically younger, although she's getting chronologically older. So they do change, but it's usually it can be traced back to some phase of life or some lifestyle choices or things you're ingesting, medications, alcohol, stuff like that tend to have a trend in adult lives. That's usually what's causing the trend in sleep changes, is the trend in the social life.
Yeah. There are some societies that really promote the idea of a nap in the afternoon. What's your perspective on that, and how does it affect your nighttime sleep?
So a nap, naps are actually great tools. They make a lot of sense evolutionarily. Now, something I'll point out really quickly, I won't go on too long of a tirade about this, but when I say you need 8 hours of sleep every night, that is the broad umbrella. It's an approximation. If you work really, really hard today, if you exercise really, really hard today, if you do a lot more of something than you usually do, you might need more sleep tonight than 8 hours. A lot of people who are really chasing athletic goals, they might need 9 or 10 hours of sleep per night, regardless of their age. So just to clarify, like I want to say that this isn't like
Sure.
a cookie cutter number. But the reason that there's 8 hours of sleep a night is because it takes on average about 16 hours to build up all the waste products to kind of make us noticeably impaired. So when you've been awake for 16 hours in a row, which is just a normal time to go to sleep, you perform on par as if you have a blood alcohol level of 0.05. If you stay up for about 18 hours, you're getting closer to the 0.08, which means that you're actually becoming slightly impaired in coordination and thinking and processing and reaction times and stuff like that. If you stay up for 24 hours, you perform as though you are past the legal threshold for being drunk and impaired. And so and then if you add alcohol to that, it's exponentially worse. So it's not like that just all of a sudden happens at 16 hours or 18 hours. That's happening all throughout the day. So if you're building up waste products, if you're outstripping the nutritional stores of your cells with what you're doing during the day, you might become depleted halfway through the day. And if you become depleted halfway through the day, a great thing to do is to take a nap and get some restoration. Now, the research has shown that as long as the nap is less than 2 hours long, and and you don't wake up from that nap any closer than 3 hours from your bedtime. So if you're going to bed at 10, your nap has to end at 7. And then it shouldn't interfere with your sleep, your what we call your nocturnal sleep or your main body sleep. So naps are not only do they feel good and feel restorative, they have been proven very, very clearly. They've been proven to enhance performance. So if you, for example, if I take somebody who sleeps well all the time and I teach them a skill this morning and I say, come back tonight and I'm going to test you on what I just taught you this morning. No practice between now and tonight. And they come back tonight and they take the test. They're going to do worse on that test than they did when they left the training session, right? There's going to be some decay. Now, if I teach somebody something this morning and I say, go home and sleep tonight and come back tomorrow morning and I'll test you. When they come back in the morning, they're actually better than they left the training at. They've improved a little and now they're going to get better every day. Interestingly, if I put a nap in the middle of that and I say, I teach you something tonight or this morning, I say, come back tonight and I'm going to test you, but I want you to take a nap during the day, let's say a 30-minute nap. I'll just pick a number. I want you to take a 30-minute nap and then come back at 6 o'clock tonight and I'm going to test you. They'll come back at 6 o'clock tonight as if they've slept the whole night and they're going to come back better, just like they did when they got to go home and go to sleep. Now, interestingly, they're going to go home and sleep later that night. And then when they come back the next morning, they're going to be even better. And so you can actually accelerate learning. You can accelerate your ability to do anything by taking naps. A 20 to 30-minute nap, that will improve your cognitive functioning. It's really good for creativity. You go up to, you get somewhere around a 45-minute nap and you're actually getting some waste products out of your brain. You're filing away some stuff you've learned. You've converted some stuff from working memory into long-term memory, and your brain will actually work better. You'll notice an enhancement of cognitive functioning, vocabulary, problem solving, scheduling, all of the executive type things. Those will get better. And then if you get, closer to the hour and a half nap, now you're actually going to be repairing your body, and you're going to repair some damaged tissues, and you're going to repartition some stored nutrients, and your body's going to actually be stronger and more enduring. And so naps are actually a great tool if you're totally getting after it. If you don't do anything but sit around your house and click a remote, then you probably don't need a nap. But if you are doing something that's outperforming your body's ability to sort of maintain and keep up with what you're doing, a nap is a performance enhancing tool.
Wow, that's very interesting because I think like you said, there's some societies that's part of the the whole concept of the siesta.
Right.
And I'd known several friends that actually did do naps and would go and lay down for an hour or something, and then come back and go to work and function very well. Um, you have, because I want to get into this. You have a sleep formula,
Right.
and we talked about it, and I'd like you to talk about it. And you also touched on the fact about that there's a lot of the sleep medicines are really causing people to have poor sleep.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the research in this is legion. You don't actually, if we did do that thing where I said where we would say this is the ideal day and put in all the ideal way to live your life, there wouldn't be any controversy over the sleep stuff. All the sleep research points to the same information, which is great. And so, to go back to my story, when these SEALs came in and were telling me all their problems, what the light bulb that went off in my head was when one guy said something about taking Ambien every night. And I just made a note on the top of my chart to check Ambien. And I'm like, it seems like a lot of guys told me that. And then when I went back and I looked through my charts, every single guy was taking Ambien. Every guy who had come in my office and complained about these symptoms that were so similar that after 10 guys came in, I could have told the other 400 guys who came to see me over the next few years, I could have told them their story better than they could tell it, because I'd heard it so many times. And it was just, I mean, it was cookie cutter. Everybody had the same symptoms and the same complaints. And so when I first started thinking about sleep, I was mainly thinking about the sleep drugs. Like maybe these sleep drugs are causing side effects, was my thinking. And the side effects could be what these people are complaining about. Now, if you know SEALs, they're an extreme culture. So if one's good, two must be better, and three is probably fantastic, right? So they're taking more than they should be taking. And then they're usually using, chasing it down with a couple of cocktails because, it's the end of the day, you're going to have a couple of beers or a couple of drinks, whatever. And then they were going to sleep and getting crappy sleep, but they were feeling really tired and feeling really able to sleep because of the drug effect. Now, that sleep architecture we were talking about, going down through the stages and the appropriate timing and going through REM and having this certain amount of deep sleep in the beginning of the night and more REM sleep in the morning. And like for all of that to happen, you can't have drugs on board. When you put drugs on board, it interferes with all of those phases. When I first started researching this, this was before any of the producers of the sleep drugs had been sued, and now they've been successfully sued dozens of times. And more of their research has come out because the FDA required them to come out with more stuff, to share more information once these lawsuits came out. And so we know that any sleep drug that you use interferes with the sleep architecture, which that means it's interfering with your sleep quality. So even if you were getting 8 hours of sleep, if 90% of your sleep was stage 2 sleep, which I saw all the time, then you aren't getting the benefits of sleep. And so it's not the same as getting 8 hours of sleep. And really the sleep formulation came about because I couldn't just take away their sleep drugs and say, suck it up, buttercup, right? Like I had to give them something because they couldn't sleep. And I didn't want them to drink themselves to sleep because that interferes with sleep architecture. And I didn't want them to take over-the-counter stuff like Benadryl because that interferes with sleep architecture. I didn't want them to go load up on a bunch of melatonin because that interferes with their sleep architecture. So what was I to do? So I came up with, I had to go back to like college level textbooks and understand what goes on when you sleep. And some of it we've talked about, and what are the different changes in your brain and in your body, and what physiological things are shifting, which hormones are going up, which hormones are going down, which neurotransmitters are changing, what should be happening to your body through this time scale of the sun going down to the sun coming up. And when we evolved with that, we evolved without electricity, of course. And so the sun was our cue, and that's how we've been entrained to be on this planet. And so the sleep drugs interfere with all of that, and all sleep drugs do. And so I just said, well, what's normally high and what's normally low, and let's see what we can do about that. So if you think about the Thanksgiving or Christmas tryptophan coma that people talk about. They eat a bunch of turkey and they go to sleep. They feel sleepy. Well, turkey doesn't have any more tryptophan than any other meat, but we just usually don't overeat. Nobody eats 2 pounds of steak, but people eat 2 pounds of turkey. And then, there's some other stuff going on there, usually alcohol and some carbohydrate loading and all that other stuff. But the tryptophan is a big factor in people taking a nap. And why is that? Because tryptophan is sort of the beginning ingredient for making melatonin, and melatonin is like the initiation cascade for the whole thing that's going to keep you to sleep, get you to sleep and keep you asleep. Matt Walker calls it the starter pistol, which I loved that metaphor. I was a little jealous that I hadn't come up with it. It's the starter pistol. It really is just the initiation. And so tryptophan becomes 5-hydroxytryptophan. 5-hydroxytryptophan with the assistance of vitamin D3 and magnesium then becomes serotonin. Serotonin, as you may have heard of, is associated with depression when serotonin is low. Serotonin becomes melatonin. And if you aren't making enough melatonin, if you don't have the nutritional pathways to make melatonin, then your brain will strip out serotonin. When you take away the serotonin to make melatonin, your serotonin goes low and you get depressed. So depression and poor sleep are closely tied. Sometimes lack of sleep leads to depression, and sometimes depression leads to poor sleep. We don't know exactly which is coming first in all cases. And after the melatonin does starter pistol goes off, one of the first neuropeptides that changes a lot, the chemistry in your brain that changes a lot, is the production of this neuropeptide called gamma aminobutyric acid. It's abbreviated capital GABA. And you can find this in health food stores all over the place. And what that does is it slows down your brain, because as I was talking about earlier, all your sensory is still working, but you don't want to pay attention to it. And so when you're asleep, you aren't paying attention to your sensory. And one of the reasons for that is because GABA makes it harder for all of those cells in your brain that deal with your sensory. It relaxes them. It makes them sit at a lower resting potential. It makes it harder to fire those neurons. And that's one of the factors for getting sleepy and falling asleep and staying asleep. And so there's GABA in my product. But all that's in my product is what I just told you: tryptophan, 5-hydroxytryptophan, magnesium, vitamin D3, a little bit of melatonin, and some GABA. There's no tricks in there. I'm just trying to supplement and fortify in your brain. I'm bringing lumber to the construction site. I'm not doing any construction, though. Your brain and body still have to do everything appropriately. So the lifestyle matters. The sleep drugs act as a trick. I just told you what GABA does. It slows down the brain. Well, the first sleep drug were the benzodiazepines like Valium. So what Valium is what's called a GABA analog. So it's a molecule that works like GABA, but it's more powerful than GABA. So you put that in your brain, it binds to the same receptor that GABA does, and it has 10 times the effect. And so people usually feel like they go to sleep well, but it also interferes with all other sorts of neurochemistry, and it messes up your sleep architecture. And people were afraid because it can cause respiratory suppression, and some people overdose unintentionally and die, and it can be very habit forming. So they came out with these new drugs, the Z drugs. It's like Ambien and Lunesta. And these were better because these worked like GABA, but instead of, when they bind that GABA receptor, instead of having 10 times the effect of GABA, they had 100 times the effect of GABA. And they went away faster, and so they weren't as habit forming. But they all interfere with sleep architecture the same. And any type of sleep drug that you take, it's a physiological trick, right? It's getting rid of something that's ordinarily making you not sleep, or something that does make you sleep well. And it's like doing a trick around that to make it seem as though everything is working well, but it's not. It's a pharmacological trick. And so it interferes with the process.
No, okay. That's brilliant. And we're going to have a link to your product in the program notes, as I mentioned, if anybody's interested in trying it. If somebody wanted to, I know you do concierge medicine, and can you tell us a little about that practice, and how would somebody work with you if they wanted to work with you?
I don't do concierge anymore. That was when I actually had a physical clinic in California.
Okay.
I still do consulting. but I have about a 2-year waiting list for that right now. It's an annual program, and it addresses all health style factors. People can contact us and get on the waiting list or inquire about the waiting list if they want, inquire more about the program. But everything, my bio, my TED Talk, my podcast videos, lectures, blogs, all that stuff, can all be found on my website, docparsley.com, like DOC is short for doctor, and then parsley like the herb, docparsley.com. The supplement can be found on there. We have a version of that supplement for kids now. We have a capsule version, a nighttime tea version of it. You can get my book there. You can get my ebook. I have downloadable PDFs on developing a nighttime routine to keep stress from keeping you from sleeping, a bedtime routine for your kids, stuff like that. Tons of information on that site.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Learned a lot about sleep and how to enhance it and improve the quality. I appreciate you coming on our program. And
yeah, my pleasure.
It was learned a lot, especially I think probably there was a lot of things, but I think the nap thing. I think I'm going to try do that because I'm in a position where I can actually do that. I don't have any hours, so Doc Parsley, once again, thank you very much. This is Oris, the official old guy at oldguytalkstome.com. Remember, it's all about creating a kick-ass life for yourself and those that you love, and sleep is a big part of that. Until next time.
Now, I want to make sure that you do 3 things. 1, subscribe so you don't miss any of these episodes. 2, share it with your friends because they need to hear this information also. To get this stuff so they can have a kick-ass life. And 3, review this podcast. And if you've got a bad review, that's fine too. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe, share, and review. Until next time, remember, it's all about creating a kick-ass life for yourself and those that you love.